What did you make of it? Like being in the consent biz, having released a book, put your heart and soul and everything into it, and then you see a national curriculum or a suggestion for a national curriculum on consent look like that.
We do know that there's this cup of tea video out there, right? That's super popular. Everyone shares it. Everyone loves it. It went viral. It's a whole thing. So I get how someone maybe had this idea of trying to be, someone that could be relatable with this approach with the milkshake thing. But, what surprises me, I think, after that, after we make room for some empathy, how someone maybe started in a place and then kind of got lost in it, is that it doesn't seem like anyone reviewed it. Did they show it to any teens? Did they show it to any experts? Did they check with anyone?
And the fact that they're getting the female character to be the aggressor. And I suppose in some way that's to make young males look at that and feel more empathy than they would if they were seeing the roles reversed. I don't know.
That's my suspicion too. Again, that's sort of, again, that little bit of empathy shows up, and so I think that's what they were going for, and it is.
And it just seems like it was like an alien landed and took into account what humans do and made their own analogy from that. It seems so divorced from any sense of common sense. So, and then I don't know about that's their kind of nod to this is what makes us now. This is what makes us relevant and relatable. We know what you kids are into. And I was like, so cringy. I was just,
It really feels like someone not of the generation was trying to pretend they were of the generation and really didn't do it right. It seems like no teens were consulted. And, also coming from some mental health advocacy work that I do, outside of the consent work that I do, which is, some of the youth boards I sat on when I was still youth and things like that. One of the big thoughts and complaints is there's so many teen focused programs or marketing or whatever that it's like a bunch of adults just sit around a room and say, you know what those youths would really like, you know what we should do for those teens. And it's like, why not bring them into the conversation? They're hungry for it. This is where it started.
While I was waiting for you to settle your baby before the interview, I hopped online and had a look at your consent videos on YouTube, and the TED talk or the TEDx talk that you gave both use the same analogy, which is the house, or metaphor, which is the house, in regards to the way the brain works when it's given a sense of safety or lack thereof. And I think the original reason why schools took up the gauntlet of teaching kids about sex is about pregnancy. And now that we're asking schools to talk about psychology and emotions and all this sort of stuff because of what's going on in colleges and high schools and what went on when I was a young person in infant school and primary school and high school. I had harassment and molestation, and this is not new. Why are people sort of, in your opinion, why are people still wanting to hold a milkshake in a video about sex and consent?
In my head, it comes back a little bit, I think, to statistics. One of the most recent studies that just came out is coming back with 1 in 3. I sometimes hypothesize from what I've, heard in people and clients and even friends and family that it's probably 1 in 2, at least, if not, for including sexual harassment, I would say everyone. Especially women and, minorities and minority LGBT groups as well. Assuming that many people probably have had personal experience with it, and especially older generations potentially not feeling they're able to speak about it or get help about it, and it's even more taboo, that then involves the psychological process of repressing, right? If we can't deal with it, if we can't cope with it, if we can't process it, if it's not okay to talk about, we then repress instead. And so, somebody in that room had something happen to them. How far along were they in their own processing of it? How much did that keep them from, if their way of coping was to protect, ignore, and pretend it didn't happen, were they maybe feeling like they were protecting a room of young people from feeling what they were feeling as they were trying to come up with this curriculum? That's sort of what I hope in my brain, in seeing the best of the world and the best of people while still keeping psychology at the forefront is, I really do have a perspective of the world is that people are doing the best that they know how to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, though, that is underneath lots and lots of layers of psychology, of different sort of protectors and responses and ways we've coped with our world that we end up projecting, whether we're aware of it or not, on everyone else. So, if that was a room full of older folks who didn't think it was okay to talk about sex, sexuality, consent, and especially sexual assaults, that probably trickled out in the material they put forward to young people who are coming from a very different space of the internet is everywhere. This information is everywhere. Porn is everywhere. This isn't news to them. And so for those two different views to clash in that moment, it really highlighted, I think, where potentially another generation wasn't prepared and wasn't ready to deliver what needed to be delivered in this moment.
Yeah.
I have my book, my book, you've seen it around, right? Real Talk About Sex and Consent.
Yeah.
I ended up writing it as a way to skip the line of curriculum to get it directly into people's homes if I couldn't get it into people's schools. But largely because the red tape to get into curriculum is outrageous. I think people who are progressive and bringing positive messages, it makes it so hard for those voices to be amplified. So that's what sort of scares me around trying to get change to happen. Is it's not just about getting consent curriculum past through right now. It's also about dismantling, I think, ideals and idealisms around power structures and people in charge, and it's way bigger than it seems, and that sometimes is disheartening.
Yeah.
Then this is often the set of responses that shows up when we get into similar situations of intimacy and consent, in terms of don't make the other person angry, don't make a scene, don't, make things worse than it is. This is, coming from now a history of trauma stuff in our histories, whether we know it's there or not, it is. And then it's also bringing along this other side of our evolutionary wiring. It's down in our nervous systems and in our parts of our brain that pop it forward even more of freeze, appease, tend, and befriend. And then, as you mentioned, the last option is if those don't seem to be working, then we're into that shutdown floor. That bottom floor of the house is the dissociative shutdown. Hide, wait till it's over, play dead, be as, non-present as possible. And then there's a psychological fail-safe, which is really neat in our brain that actually keeps us, alive and healthy after the fact, is that either repression or splitting or dissociative, not really feeling attached to the memory and numbness. So they're all adaptive when our bodies do these things. So my plea to anyone who's listening right now is, if you know someone in the school system, if you have any connections to people who care about consent, parents, networks, talk to them, watch my TED Talk, have a look at my book. I've put all this stuff together. The feedback from people that have read it is incredible. It's really humbling to hear it, but it's also empowering for me to take their words and, continue to press forward that this is the book we need in classrooms, in kids' hands. This TED Talk is one that should be in classrooms. And to, if you're not sure, have a look at it yourself. If there's any feedback, you can reach out to me. But this is stuff that needs to get out there. And if we can all work together, I promise the world would be a different place. There's no way it couldn't. There's never been a time in history where education done right hasn't created some type of positive improvement. So we need to band together and really, really get it out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's because
if I could make one change in the world, it would be that every single person had access to trauma therapy starting in grades 7, 8, or 9. And that would be, I think we'd see a very different world if that was normalized.
I absolutely 100% agree with you.
So I really appreciate you having me and chatting about everything. It's been fantastic, and
I feel terrible
really
because it was so spontaneous, and while I was waiting to talk to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got so much I want to talk to her. How do I keep it concise and whatever? But at the same time, I don't like to write a list of questions. I like to have that organic, in the moment light bulb go off, because I'm the blank slate. I want you to tell me things and me to go, oh yeah, okay. And I have other people listening thinking the same thing. But the big reaction to this thing, I'm so happy. Universally, everybody just went, no, please, no, this is wrong. So there's hope. There's hope out there.
There's hope.
All. Yeah.
I think there is.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, and we'll